Right, okay. Where do I even begin? So yeah, it's been a while. Almost half a year, but moving on. Apologies to anyone who subscribed in the past 4 months. It's pretty much a ghost channel. I'm not dead, and I will be back to making videos. I had a laundry list of issues over the last 4 months. I was finishing up my first year of uni, and then I lost a bunch of scripts, then my laptop broke, my computer broke, and you get the idea. But yeah, I'm sorry for the lack of content. Regular, or at least more regular videos will be released now that I'm back on track. But yeah, in good news, I have a couple of video scripts already finished and ready to make, including this one right here, that I wrote nearly 4 months ago. When all the technology around me was exploding, the only thing that was bringing me joy, / misery, was Bloodborne. And my thoughts on it then are completely true now. So without stalling anymore, here is basically 10 minutes of me gushing over a 3-year-old game. Enjoy! As a gamer, I generally don't like to be challenged. I never go back through games on harder difficulties. I detest challenge modes and trophies that require me to seek out super bosses or optional areas. When coming up to a difficult boss or high difficulty spike in a game, rather than rise to the challenge or feel rewarded through trial and error, I get frustrated relatively early and will look up guides, cheese it, or just give up. I dread the end of Kingdom Hearts games because I know I'll have to fight a gauntlet of difficult bosses when I just want to get to the next cutscene. I play games for the stories and characters. Some of my favourite games are narrative games with little to no gameplay. Not one of the games in my all-time favourite list could be considered challenging until a couple of months ago. With all this in mind about how much I detest challenge and difficulty in my video games, I truly can't describe how much Bloodborne took over my life a couple months ago and single-handedly changed how I appreciate challenging games. It's an experience so singular, so engrossing and captivating in its world and themes that it engulfed every waking moment of my free time. I couldn't stop from the moment I started until I saw the end credits. I missed video deadlines, failed to write scripts and do uni work, as I became completely addicted to the eldritch nightmare of Yarnham's world. Now that sounds like a negative, and especially in regards to the Nier video I've been promising for a while, it is. But it's important to realise that not since playing my first Final Fantasy game have I been so singularly engrossed in the game world, where the melding of mechanics, level design, audio and visuals come together to sell a world so believable that oh so rare sense of wonder that games can deliver engulfed the entire experience. All of this from a game that 3 years ago I completely wrote off without much of a second thought because I deemed it too difficult. From Software's Soul series has garnered a reputation since 2008 with the release of Demon's Souls for being a series of brilliantly designed and inventive RPGs with brutal difficulty and unforgiving nature. This reputation has made the series what it is today, one of the most beloved and respected game series of the last and current generation of games. However, like James Joyce's Ulysses, it's this level of difficulty that causes many to write it off before even trying to understand it. Or like me, starting it and abruptly ending halfway through the first chapter when you realise you only understood 2% of what you just read. Luckily, unlike Ulysses, you don't need an encyclopedic knowledge of Dublin in 1904. What you do need to know is that Bloodborne is hard, but only because other games have watered you down. Take it from me, as someone who is the constant liability in any game of Fortnite, this isn't a game that gets easier as you go, it's one you get better at. It isn't this momentous climb that only a particular type of gamer can accomplish, and that's likely the big mistake many who write the Souls games off suffer. As I said earlier, for the most part I suck at games. More importantly, character action games. My reflexes are too slow, my patience for trial and error is non-existent. Yet by the end of Bloodborne, I was sliding around werewolf abominations like it was Keemstar.
I'm fast as fuck, boy!
Despite the fact that Bloodborne is firmly an RPG, you will never be able to overlevel. Sure, when you run through on New Game Plus, you'll be one-shotting the starter enemies who stole your lunch money at the start. They'll still have no trouble giving you an ultra wedgie if you haven't got those reflexes down. But by now you've probably watched, read and listened to hundreds of people tell you about the difficulty and rewarding gameplay of the Souls series. It's a moot point. But difficulty isn't the reason I love Bloodborne so much. Like I said at the beginning, being challenged isn't how I get my kicks in gaming. It's Bloodborne's world, art direction, lore and atmosphere that made learning and mastering this beautiful, terrifying nightmare of a game worth it. If there's one advantage the game industry has over all other mediums, it's world building. Where a book can describe an incredible fantasy world, and a film can show it, in a video game, you can inhabit it. It's the one advantage that games like Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls, and World of Warcraft understand, and it's why they stand out. It's why you remember them years later. This feeling of wonder at a game world is something I remember fondly when thinking back on my first Pokemon game, on my first playthrough of Fallout 3. But it's a feeling I haven't felt for a while in the current gen of gaming. For a while I just assumed I'd become jaded, and that these feelings were more to do with nostalgia than anything else. That was until I took my first steps into the decaying city of Yarnham. The Victorian era gothic horror inspired aesthetic is palpably dripping with character. From the meticulously crafted architecture, aligned with eerie shadows, lighting, and endless layers of detail scattered around it. From the first frame, Bloodborne is again dripping with style, and more importantly, a thick layer of atmosphere. Bloodborne isn't a survival horror game, yet it's one of the scariest and most unsettling games I've played in years, because its world is so all-encompassing. Its horror is a specific brand of psychological. It isn't filled with jump scares, well, maybe a few, but instead filled with terrifying H.P. Lovecraft-inspired cosmic horror. Bloodborne is one of the best uses of Lovecraft's brand of unknown and incomprehensible horror. You start out Bloodborne feeling like you are trapped in an unforgiving and hostile world, and it's one that only gets more unforgiving and incomprehensible as you go on. Rather than follow the veritable rule of any story, wherein the answers become more clear and you get a resolution to your questions, Bloodborne just continues to add more and make things more confusing as you go. Things become more terrifying, more unknown, and more engrossing. With all that being said, it'd be surprising to know that taken on a surface level, Bloodborne's story is paper thin. The 4 or 5 cutscenes that actually play through the game can feel like little more than artsy imagery. The few NPCs you meet seem to spout incomprehensible gibberish about castles you don't know about, and
vile bloods.
You know about as much about as
Pale blood.
You can complete Bloodborne having learned absolutely nothing about how its world works, who you're fighting, or why you're fighting them at all. However, dig a little deeper, begin to read weapon descriptions, take in environmental clues, and using a bit of your own intuition, and you begin to piece together a deep, complex, cosmic horror narrative, complete with extraterrestrial gods, sacrifice, insanity, the insignificance of human beings in a world with conflicts and reasons we couldn't even begin to understand. Bloodborne's narrative, and more importantly the way it tells it, is one of the best uses of Lovecraftian horror, and its use of the video game medium to do this is brilliant. Throughout Bloodborne, while collecting blood echoes, you'll also be collecting insight, a separate currency you obtain through fighting bosses and seeing specific in-game events. Though this currency is used to summon allies in co-op and can buy gear, it also affects the events and visuals of the game in some interesting ways. See, insight represents your character's psyche and its influence on the cosmic horror of the game's world. A big theme of Lovecraft's stories is sanity, and how characters' minds are twisted and warped with their exposure to the events around them. Bloodborne's world warps and changes as your insight increases. Enemies begin to look more otherworldly, environments warp, and this fucking nightmare fuel shows up. It's an inventive and unique use of video games' interactivity to portray a key element of Lovecraft's horror that just couldn't be portrayed in any other medium. The idea that the game's horror isn't just hard to comprehend, but that your mind is so repulsed, so baffled by it, that it actively shuts it out, and the loosening grip on your own sanity is the only thing keeping the veil back. Even when that veil is pulled back, Bloodborne might be one of the rare examples in which the terrifying, disgusting, and sometimes even beautiful in the most fucked up way possible, designs that the art directors and visual artists cooked up are more disturbing than my own imagination. There are enemies in Bloodborne that literally use their grotesque designs to actually beat me, when they caught me off guard. I'm looking at you, you fucking skeleton mass body. Seriously, this thing's fucking gross. And yet at the same time, amongst the misery and agony of From Software's masochistic fantasy, there is a surreal beauty underpinning it all. The cosmic entities have this twisted elegance to them. The hunter's dream feels like this melancholy last breath of hope for the world. The way fires crackle as the moon hangs low in a bright purple sky. Yarnham feels like a place pushed past the point of human boundaries, and over to something we could only appreciate on the most cerebral level. Its lack of answers, at least upon first experience, is part of the wonder, part of the intrigue. It's so I'd almost verge recommending not reading weapon descriptions or dissecting the environment, because the sense of wonder and grandeur that my first playthrough had is an experience I haven't had in years. While you might hear a lot of people describe Bloodborne as how games used to be, I'd say instead that Bloodborne plays how you remember games playing, how detailed and full of wonder your nostalgic memories are of a game's world, how large and vast it felt. And then you play through again, and trust me, once you finish Bloodborne, you'll want to play it again. And you begin to understand its world. You read item descriptions, you start to understand the jargon said by NPCs. And you begin to understand this really deep, and more importantly very deliberate narrative. While some might find foul with having to piece together a story from item descriptions and vague hints, after all, why can FromSoft get away with it but Bungie got crucified for it? But I think it's all about intent. While Bungie's reasoning was born out of mismanagement and lazy story delivery, in Bloodborne it's done of service of the narrative. You're not supposed to dig deeper. The very themes imply that to know such knowledge is to lose further grip on your own sanity. By learning more, you're actively partaking in the game's narrative in a meaningful way. And that's why I have nothing but respect for the way From Software delivered the narrative in such a cryptic and open to interpretation way. Bloodborne, on the surface, is everything I tend to avoid in video games. It's brutally hard, requires patience and copious trial and error, its story is basically non-existent on first glance, and its difficulty spikes are frequent. From an outside perspective, Bloodborne is everything I avoid in video games, and as such I avoided it for years, simply believing it wasn't for me. In hindsight, fear kept me away from one of my favourite games of the generation, and so I made this video to appeal to players like me, to the ones who wrote the Souls games off because of difficulty or didn't attempt out of fear of frustration. Bloodborne is hard to learn, but once you have it, it never feels unfair. When watching videos on Souls games, you always hear people talk about the fable feeling of reward that these games provide. That while they are punishing, the trade-off is this feeling of accomplishment that makes it worthwhile. I didn't really get this when people described it to me, but I think it's about more than just beating a boss or reaching a checkpoint. It's about etching your way through a world that seems desperate to push you back, adamant to shut you out and be left alone. The feeling of accomplishment isn't just about winning, it's about earning your place in this world, seeing it grow from terrifying unknown to a place you not only know but have beaten. Few game worlds inspire such awe and terrifying wonder as Yarnham. Fewer still have such a tight grip on you that you feel compelled to push on the countless deaths and missed deadlines as this. I hate difficult games, but I loved every painful, horrible second of Bloodborne. If you've made it this far, first, poor you, and second, thanks for watching. Getting back into the swing of things and editing this surprisingly tough little video together really did remind me how much I both missed and loved to make these videos. As I said at the start, apologies to anyone who subscribed while my channel was pretty much dead. I am now totally back and ready to make videos over the next year. I'll be making content on pretty much anything gaming, and sometimes even non-gaming content if I feel I have something worthwhile to say on it. So yeah, if you're a subscriber, then thank you for your patience. And hey, if you're new, then welcome and consider subscribing. I'll be creating videos every 1 or 2 weeks, or longer depending on the size of the video, so I won't be taking too much of a big place in your sub feed. And hey, if you like this video, a thumbs up always helps. And that's all I have to say. Until next time, and thanks for watching.